Everybody, Dr. Dan Lawrence here. This is a follow up, kind of part two to the video that I made about using ChatGPT and artificial intelligence as a writer. I felt compelled to make another video about the limitations of the technology as well. Um, because in the excitement of a new technology, we sometimes go overboard with thinking about its capabilities. And I think that's something that Bagost touches on really well in that piece from the Atlantic that I shared. I mean, even the title, right? Is Chat GPT is a lot dumber than you think, or something like that. And it really is, right? It's not a thinking machine. It's not a consciousness, as far as we understand. Anyway, there was that Google uh, ethicist who seem to think that one of their proprietary artificial intelligent chatbots had become sentient. But I mean, that look into that if you're interested. It's certainly a fun thought experiment. It doesn't seem to be quite quite right. It doesn't seem that we've created sentient beings, although they're very persuasive, right? It seemed to someone who isn't looking behind the scenes at the development of the technology maybe could be easily convinced that these platforms are sentient. They seem to have values. They seem to be self-aware, but because they're producing language that was created by humans, that's fundamentally how they work, right? So go back to that idea by Martin Heidegger, right? That all technology is essentially an extension of humanity being having been created by humans. But Heidegger is also a great place to look into the critique of something like this. Um, what is the purpose of it? What is the purpose of something like ChatGPT? Or, is it a means to an end? There's Heidegger, right? Um, and and even if it is a means to some end, certainly it's more than that as well, right? I'll go back to that hammer. It's such an easy example, but it's such a good place to start. Is for Heidegger, the hammer is more than just a tool to hammer in nails. For Heidegger, technology is the hammer actually allows you to live in a world in which things can be hammered. It actually changes your fundamental relationship to the world. It changes the way you perceive reality. It changes that reality, right? You now live in a world in which things can be built by hammers, and in which you can be a builder of things with a hammer, and others can build things, and um, all the ramifications of that. And so, such the same as with artificial intelligence language models, that they don't seem to have been created with any specific purpose in mind, other than like the purely exploratory, let's see if we can do this kind of thing, and let's see what would happen if we did, um, create these large language learning models, um, that can basically create text in specific genres and certain content. But so once you actually learn, and I really encourage you, to play with these tools, to experiment with them. I think once you do that, maybe like for an hour, or do it for an hour, for like a week or something, once a day, or half an hour once a day for a week, and kind of get a sense of what they can do and what they can't do. Your intuition's probably going, your conscience is going to guide you there really well. Let's listen to that inner voice. For Plato, it was the daemon, right? The kind of inner guiding voice that you have. There are things it can do and things that it can't do, like all technology. Some technology is really disruptive, and occupies a large portion of our time, like a smartphone. Americans are using smartphones for 3.5 hours a day. That was certainly a very seismic shift in the way that we interact with media. Some things aren't, right, and you have the choice, right? You have the choice to, am I going to use this or not? Am I going to track my usage of it? Am I going to be conscious of how I'm aware of how I'm using it and reflect on that and be critical about that. So ChatGPT makes a lot of mistakes, right? It's not. I said it, I probably mistakenly said it was accurate. It's accurate in the sense that you know if it can do genre and it can do content pretty well. It's going to pretty accurately be able to create a sonnet, or it's going to be pretty accurately able to create a haiku. But is it going to be truthful? Not all the time. No, it's actually what Bagos says is very good at bullshitting. I don't I wouldn't personally use that term, but it makes mistakes, factual mistakes, historical mistakes, scientific mistakes. So it's not accurate in that sense. And so you have to be a fact checker, an editor. You have to be the guiding light when you're using that software. You have to be the one. And so the limitations are could you have it create a pretty convincing 5 paragraph high school level essay on a topic? Yeah, you know, I would say definitely. Like a B, maybe like a B level, pretty convincing 5 paragraph high school level essay or something like that. Could it could it produce a really profound reflection on the relationship between rhetoric and truth? That's like one of my exam questions, right? Or one of my classes, Writing 303, which I always share with students early in the semester, so I don't mind talking about it here. The profound relationship between rhetoric and truth as it emerges across multiple texts by multiple authors. Probably not. I mean, I've plugged some prompts like that into ChatGPT, and it, kind of it can waffle around a little bit, and it hits the mark in some places. But then you spend all this time editing it, so you have to ask yourself, like, is that a useful use case for it for you to as a substitute for your thinking? And again, probably not. It seems to be a useful tool to like get the ball rolling, to get sparks running and get creative ideas going, and other platforms too. Like, I've experimented with something called Novel AI, which is a short story and creative writing artificial intelligence platform based on I'm pretty sure it uses GPT-3 as its kind of main function, the learning model, the language learning model underneath it. And same thing there, like, could it write a kind of passing high school level short story about something? Yeah, pretty close. But is it going to write like a really, like a publishable, beautiful, interesting story? Not really. Right? And so what's better, like starting, letting your own voice and your own thinking and your own humanity be expressed through a story, or torturously, like, using AI to try to get it to try to get it to create something halfway decent, and then spending all this time revising and editing it. Maybe that's a fun kind of creative project. I've thought about maybe even incorporating some assignments like that, like the interacting with the artificial intelligence and going back and forth on it. So again, there's limitations, right? And it's going to get better, and there will be new manifestations of it and new developments, and GPT-4, and so on and so on, and whatever comes next. But I guess just I wanted to make another video to help you be aware of some of the constraints and think about some use cases for how this technology could be applied. And that's even if you want to use it, right? Some people will look at this and say, this doesn't really help me in my writing process in any kind of way. If you are going to use it in a writing process, I would say do it during your brainstorming stage, right? So I always teach a writing process. I think that's a best practice, anywhere. Writing instructors and educators and professors are saying use a writing process. So it's like draft or pre-writing, right? Brainstorming and pre-writing and research, always start there. Then drafting, then revision, reorganizing, adding content, deleting content, and then editing, where you carefully go through line by line. If you're going to use artificial intelligence, that makes most sense, I think, in your pre-writing process. So it's like generating ideas, maybe looking at new angles, getting some sparks flying, fighting some writer's block. Those seem like really good use cases for artificial intelligence. I don't think a good use case is to expect it to produce a draft. That doesn't quite make sense to me. And then of course you're going to run into ethical issues. Various universities are going to develop their own particular policies about um, whether that constitutes plagiarism or academic integrity issues. And there are some AI detection platforms out there. I don't think they're very good, honestly. Um, so, from like a practical standpoint, could you use it to create some of your assignments? That's not what I'm most worried about. I really doesn't. I don't think you should do that. I don't think you really can. I don't think it's going to be good for you to do that. You're not going to have the growth and learning of having done that thinking yourself. But I just don't think that's the use case. I don't think that's the most practical way to approach it. If you want to seriously think about how can I be an effective writer while also playing with some of the newest technology that's out there and do it in a way that's going to assist my process in some way. Um, I think that the way to do that is to incorporate artificial intelligence at some point, if you want to use it. That is, right. If you're interested in using it and experimenting with it, incorporating it somewhere in the pre-writing part of your writing process. So if you're stuck on an idea, or you're looking for a new story beat, and it's predictable in some ways too, and kind of boring. Some of the things it comes up with, some of the things are interesting. When I was using Novel AI, which is particularly geared toward fantasy, fantasy fiction writers, it kind of does a lot of the same things over and over. Like, and then there was a cave, and then there was a treasure chest inside of the cave, and then it turned out that the treasure chest was actually a monster, and it does a lot of things like that over and over again. ChatGPT, it has some pitfalls too, where it kind of falls into a lot of cliches and regurgitation, and that's why Bogos calls it kind of boring in some ways. Kind of rote, really expected arguments. And philosophy is like the opposite of that, right? I mean, philosophy has always been about turning the world upside down and looking at it from another angle. So it would be really hard to make the argument, I think, that ChatGPT is philosophical in any way. Certainly not. It's not conscious. I don't think it's very philosophical. But can it? I mean, if you asked it to say make an argument, Bogos does this too. Ask it to make an argument within a branch of a certain type of philosophy. It can do that. It can mimic and emulate the language of a particular academic discipline pretty well, pretty consistently. It's not always going to be accurate though. So it's like you have to know something about epistemology before you ask it to make an epistemological argument, because you then need to fact check it and make sure it's accurate and make sure it's doing something that looks like, and making an epistemological argument. So it's not it can't do everything for you on its own. You work with it. That is that's what the writer does. If the writer wants to use artificial intelligence, the writer is going to be really like working with the AI, again, as a kind of like a little helper, a little companion. It's kind of like, maybe think of it like the little robot on your shoulder or something like that can tell you strange, weird ideas, and maybe you go, oh, that's a good idea, or that's not really a good idea, and I need to fact check that, and I need to use my own creative thinking and philosophical thinking and critical thinking to kind of tame those ideas. And certainly you can always shut it off, right? You can always remove the robot from your shoulder and say, I don't want to, maybe it's not at a point right now where you want to engage with it. Maybe it's just something you want to play with it to see what everybody's talking about, and experiment with it. Maybe it's something where, you want to take an afternoon and write a short story or write an essay using it just to see what you can and what you can't do. Those are things I would really encourage. Like I don't want to be the kind of professor educator who says just block this out and don't consider it and don't engage with it, because I think the danger, the worry the fear that I have, um, actually is not students using this to cheat or plagiarize or do the work for them. The fear that I have is students being left behind by not engaging with the technology, because we just don't know, right? Like, it seems like this technology might be something that's used in writers' workflows in the future, probably being used in content generation mills and web writing quite a bit already, probably being used journalistically, probably being used for some script writing. And you can do that, right? If you ask ChatGPT, write me a YouTube script for a topic that I don't know anything about, and then you could kind of play off of that. Yeah, people are definitely doing things like that already with ChatGPT. So my greater fear is actually students being left behind by not daring to engage at some level critically with the technology. And maybe it's not all it's cracked up to be, right? That's probably what you're going to find when you start using it is, okay, there's some interesting use cases here, but it's not really going to write your term papers for you, or whatever. It's going to maybe spark some ideas and get some creativity going. So there are a lot of limitations to it, but you wouldn't know that unless you tried, right? You wouldn't know that unless you engaged with it and opened it up and created an account and played around with it for a few hours at least, and be amazed by it, and then be angry at it, and then be concerned by it, and then go through the stages of artificial intelligence grief or something like that. So, okay, so that's my follow up on the limitations of artificial intelligence that I felt compelled to make, because there's many sides to the box, many sides to the machine. And then we're always going to be continually trying to understand it and what it can and what it cannot do. And if nothing else, play with it and see what happens and what you think. All right, good luck, everybody.